I've got a kid I'd like to share. I've got a question about something that I need help with. I just want to show off my favorite locomotive, whatever it is. Just drop me an email, say what you want to do, or actually, you don't even have to do that. Just ask for a slot, and or if you need a little bit of guidance, if you would like that, we can do that. So anyway, I'll turn it back over to Jim, but please drop me an email if you're interested. Thanks.
We really do hope that you will, because it's something that we think is gaining popularity, and something that I think everybody is enjoying. So we'd love to see what you're building or what you're thinking about building. We have the Association of Professional Model Builders presentation coming up on the 17th of February at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So if you're around and would like to see that, we encourage you to do it. We think that it'll be interesting and you'll learn something. Now I'd like to turn to Paul Thompson for his quick tip of the evening. Paul?
Great, thank you, Jim. Tonight I thought I'd do something just a little bit different, and just pardon me here while I get my screen up. I just have to find this stuff. I'm going to share the screen, and we should be away. Okay. What you're looking at is something that was sitting on my shelf, and I got to wondering, well, can I use this? It's kind of a nice looking model. I was putting together stuff for P48, and I thought, okay, this might work. But as you can see, it's got one minor little detail on the right-hand side. It's 1/43, which means it's a bit big if you're doing P48. So tonight, I'm going to sort of take a trip here and give you a formula. The formula is real inches divided by scale inches, or actually by scale, sorry, and that equals the scale inches. What this does, it allows you to convert darn near anything that you've got to measure into your scale. It works in all scales, 1/87th, 1/48th, whatever. And what this allowed me to do in this particular case was I was looking at a 1954 Willys. I found the wheelbase, which was 118 inches, and I found the overall length of the thing. The model, I also measured, wheelbase 2.5 inches and the length 4 inches. So what does this tell me? Well, using my little formula, we've got a wheelbase that equals 2.45 in 48, and in 47th, it's 2.51, which is darn near perfect. So this thing is just slightly over 1/48, or between 1/47th and 1/48th. So if I'm using just wheelbase, this will probably fit. I have to be aware of the fact that I might have to set it away from anything that's technically 1/48, but it will work. The length is also close, but it works out to 1/46, just using the formula. So what I'm saying here is if you found an airplane model, wingspan, you have to determine what you're going to use to identify the scale. In cars and stuff, it's easy, wheelbase, overall length. But beyond that, you can measure ships, you can measure whatever you find, even human beings. And if something just strikes your fancy, it might just fit on your railroad. Anyway, guys, that's the tip for the night. Thank you very much. And I'll stop sharing.
Well, Paul, I really do appreciate that, because I hear all the time that people in different scales are having trouble finding this or finding that. And it's amazing to me what you may be able to use in those scales if you'll just go to a measurement like you're talking about. So thank you so very much. We have a Clark Kooning coming up. Clark is an MMR. He does a segment for us called Modeling with Clark. And it's been very popular. And Clark, I appreciate you doing it so much. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, let's see if we can share the screen. And we'll do 15 minutes with Clark, I hope. There we go. Everybody see?
Yep.
Okay, good. So let's go. I mentioned before these little LED testers. This one's from NCE. Great little gizmo if you're testing LEDs, because especially when you get the ones from China, they don't all work. But a little tester like this goes a long way. And also, if you've cut them, you can figure out which one's the positive and which one's the negative lead. Anyway, tonight we're going to talk. Let's talk airbrush tips. Apparently, that's not an airbrush. That's a brush. Okay, let's go. So an airbrush is a miniature air gun, which atomizes paint so it can be applied a thin coat with good coverage. One of the really neat channels YouTube I came across is this guy called the Grumpy Modeler. And I think I have an akin to him because I'm kind of a grumpy guy too. So an airbrush choice, boy, that's like fighting a Chevy truck guy over a Ford truck guy, and then the Ram guy jumps in. Everybody has their own opinion on a model, but it's really a personal preference. And one of the big tricks I always say to people is feel how it feels in your hand. I have big clumpy fingers, and I like a good heavy airbrush. So that may not work for everybody else. Now I'm going to wade in, and my personal preference is the Badger 175, and it's a dual action brush, which means you can control the amount of air and paint applied at the same time. It's also a internal mix, but we're going to talk about that. And the reason why Badger made this for acrylic paints, it's kind of neat. Acrylic paints, or I should say the Badger brushes, everything is a little bigger, including the siphon tube. All their orifices are a little bit bigger, and it is really made for acrylic paints. And we're going to talk about why. Now, that being said, you can still use it for solvent-based paints. There's no problem. So what's the deal about acrylic paints? Well, the base pigments in solvent-based paints are about the size of a golf ball. Comparison in acrylic paint, not pant, but paint, the base pigment is about beach ball size. So in order to force a beach ball through your airbrush, you need a larger space for the paint to flow smoothly. And this is one of the reasons why I like the 175. Now, an internal mix, a lot of people don't like them because there's a lot more cleaning, but it's my preference. It allows paint and air to be mixed internally or within the body of the brush. A double action, which means you can push down on the trigger and get straight air. And then as you pull back the trigger, you're going to get both paint and air, and it's applied to the surface. So a little chemistry. Making your homemade acrylic cleaner. Now, the best thing is to go buy a couple graduated or a 6-pack of these graduated squeeze bottles from Amazon. These are 250 ml bottles. Now, I got this from the Grumpy Modeler. He makes this homemade solution, so my tip of the hat is to him. For the cleaner, you're going to use 100 ml of Windex. The better one is with ammonia D. 150 milliliters of distilled water, approximately 70 milliliters of alcohol. Now, you can just add that to the top of the neck of the bottle. It's not a big deal. And 4 drops of glycerin. And you can get pretty well all these at your local drugstore or pharmacy. Especially if they have a wide selection and they have cleaning supplies, you can buy the Windex there. Now the thinner is 175 milliliters of distilled water, 75 of alcohol. And, but like with the cleaner too, I just added it up to the top of the neck, and then 10 to 15 drops of glycerin. Now, one of the things about this, and I just put it in the bottles and throw some labels on it. Mine are called the Big Kahuna Acrylic Cleaner. My kids used to call me the Big Kahuna. So you're all set. And then you'll notice the one is the blue is the cleaner and the clear one is the thinner. Now, I will tell you something about ammonia. Not a lot of guys like to use ammonia with their brushes because it will eat off the finish of a brush. But I personally haven't had that experience, and I use Windex, which has ammonia in it. I also use ammonia, and I've never had it really tarnish the sort of nickel finish on it. Now, not all paints react well with the thinner, so take a test ahead of time. Sometimes they don't like the glycerin in it. Sometimes they just don't like the Windex, or the not so much the Windex, but the ammonia in it, and it will curdle the paint. But a lot of paints like Apple Barrel and stuff, this works just fantastic. And you put a little drop in there, or thin it out, and put it through your airbrush. Now, a handy tip, Badger has these, and I believe others have them, and they're just a screw-on attachment, is a quick disconnect for your airbrush. Here's the little attachment, and you just screw it onto the base of your airbrush, and then they have, Badger has the hose with the quick connect unit on it, and you just snap it on. And it's fantastic when you've only got a single hose, and I have 2 or 3 of those airbrushes, so I don't have to clean them between colors. And I just snap them on, snap them off, and continue to paint. It really makes them easy to flip off and on. Now, some of the little tools that you may want to use for airbrush cleaning, which is what most people just dread. One of the real neats is these flossing brushes you can buy at the drugstores, and they are just great for a reach around. They're very soft. They won't damage your airbrush, the metal or anything, and you can get around and clean them out just fantastic. And they're flexible. They're handy as heck. I've been using them in other applications as well around the railroad. So you want to get up and clean where the paint goes in. You want to disconnect. You want to disassemble the tip and clean all around there, and it works well. Now I have a big hunk of beeswax, and all your screws connections, you should just take where the screws are, rim it around the beeswax a little bit, take your finger, give it a few wipes, and that little bit of heat from your hands will seal around that screw connection. And then when you screw it back in, it eliminates a lot of the air leaking. If you get any, you'd be surprised you won't. But with the beeswax, you won't get any at all. Needle juice is a Badger product, which I use quite often. It's just you just put a little drop on your finger, take out your needle, slide it through that little bit of juice, and put it back in, and it really helps the needle to move freely in your brush. It reduces the paint adhesion to the tips of the brush, and just reduces the amount of cleaning. I seldom take apart the whole brush, maybe about the 10th time after I painted, because I make sure I run through a lot of cleaner through the brush and clean just the tip and the needle, just at the front of the airbrush after I painted, and I usually have no problems. Now, if you've ever left your brush out and you've had acrylic paint in it, I'm gonna tell you a little trick. And I learned this years ago in a little story. I was in a hobby shop that I used to frequent, or I'll still frequent, and a guy came in and he was really mad at the owner for selling him this airbrush and this acrylic paint. He says, it's hardened in there. I've used lacquer thinners. I can't get it off. And he was really going at this poor guy. And I said, hold it. I said, have you got the brush with me? He says, yeah. I said, give it to me. I will have it cleaned out for you and back to you tomorrow. He said, oh, no, you can't. I want a new brush. I said, you don't need a new brush. I said, you have to understand how to clean them. And so what I did was I get some spick and span and the cleaning powder, a little bottle of ammonia liquid, and some hot water just from out of your tap. Don't use boiling water. So you're going to take a small mixing glass, about 8 to 12 ounces, put the hottest hot water in your out of your tap, and put it in an 8-ounce glass of glass. You want a glass. Add a tablespoon of spick and span, the cleaning powder, and mix into the hot water until dissolved. Make sure you do that first. Then you add about a capful of ammonia into that. And if you can't quite smell it, add a little bit more. You got to smell it. I'm not talking it should knock you over, just to know that you have ammonia in there. And then you're going to mix that well. And I drop the whole airbrush into that mixture and let it sit for 5-10 minutes. And then I take one of those little, you can use one of those little brushes or a little soft toothbrush and just clean it off. And that dried paint will just come off of that metal, no problem at all. Now, sometimes you have to repeat it if it's really heavy, but generally I have used this trick and solution many, many times, and people are amazed at how well it works. Let me see. I'm just checking my list. I think that's it. So that's 15 minutes with Clark.
Well, listen, I got a question for you.
Go ahead, caller. First time caller, long time listener.
What paints do not adversely react to the thinner?
Well, one you don't want to use. You like to use it with Tamiya paints. I use their thinner on that. But like the Apple Barrel, the Craft Smart paint you can buy from Michael's. It's funny. Sometimes it's the color. Yesterday I did some black. I put that in there. I had no problem. I did it another time with a white and it became clumpy. So I'm not sure if it's the pigments or what, but I haven't really made a list. I could probably after every time I do it, but you just take a little bit, pour it into a little cup or something, put just a drop or two in there, stir it up. And if you see it, curdle almost like milk, it's not going to work through your airbrush.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, Clark. Really do appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Listen, now we've got a great featured modeler tonight, Chris Lane, who is editor of ON30 Annual, HON3 Annual, and the new Garden Trains Annual. So, Chris, we're really looking forward to this tonight. So, welcome, and please take over.
Thank you for that tremendous introduction. It's a bright, shiny lie. I'm a very average modeler. I'm good at promotion. So that's why you know who I am. And I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to people. I've been a modeler for a very long time, and I've got a little program. I'll kind of walk people through kind of my journey in that and kind of get to how I got into the magazine business and became an editor in that. But to Clark's tips there are fantastic. My first good tool as a modeler, I bought it when I was 10 or 11, was a Pache VL airbrush, which I still own and still works. And I own a lot of other airbrushes too, but I still love that one. And like Clark, I've used acrylics for many, many years because my wife is a migraine sufferer. And when we got married, I got out the Floquil and painted a caboose or something, and instantly she had a migraine, and that was the end of that. So I got rid of my Floquil a long, long time ago and started using Tamiya. And it's good being a narrow gauge modeler because you don't need a ton of colors. So a lot of the military colors work really, really well for narrow gauge guys. And I've been using acrylics ever since. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen a little bit. I got a little bit of a program here, and presumably, look at that. I spotlighted it with red just so I could find it easily. Last time I had a little trouble finding it. So now I did better this time. So, hey, that's me. And I was born in Colorado as a baby, and then got bigger. And I don't know why it's doing that. I tried to kill all this stuff. Let me go back just because. I went to Fort Lewis College down in Durango, Colorado, to be close to the trains. And I got a business degree. That's my training, actually, is business. And we were talking about scales and ratios and everything, and because they make you use Excel and everything, I've actually written a program in Excel that allows me to easily convert all of my dimensions. I just put them in and do that, and I'll kind of show you why in a minute. It keeps doing that, and it's kind of annoying. But I started with Model Railroading Magazine in 1994, Karstens 2008. I've been with White River since 2014. A little bit about White River, and you guys can read this. I'm not going to kind of go over it all, but we do a lot of publications, and both in the model train and the prototype railroading field. You know, you're familiar with the O&30 annual, the H-O-3 annual, which Jim mentioned, that I edit. We do the Narrow Gauge Gazette, and this just needs to knock it off. I'm gonna bail out of this and maybe do it by hand and see if it doesn't behave itself a little better. Okay. Yeah, it seems to be working a little bit better. And I'll get to that photo that I bounced off of. Okay, this one. This is a mainline model of a stock car. I built this when I was 10. And that's, you know, some people get into trains early. I was nuts about trains apparently from the womb, and did Lionel. And at 10 years old, just, you know, told the old man, who was also a model editor, still is, you know, I love narrow gauge and I want to build some trains. So we bought a mainline kit, and it's got Grant Line trucks on it. And that's something I did at 10. And a little bit of weathering on there is from that Pache airbrush I mentioned. I primarily modeled the Colorado and Southern Railroad, and this is a Bachmann that is slowly being converted into Colorado and Southern number 13. Scratch built the toolbox and the rear bunker there. The Bachmann is actually a pretty good model of the little moguls that the CNS used, but they need a little bit of work. Primarily, they look short in the tender because they would build up these coal boards and everything, and these toolboxes, which made them appear much higher than they actually were. This is an old Star Models urethane kit that I built. And this one is, the handrails are a little beat up, but this car worked for years on the Denver O-Scale Club. And it made a lot of laps around that layout while that layout still existed. I was a member there for about a decade, back in the late 80s, early 90s. This is a little Mount Princeton, again, on the CNS line, little station. This is actually a classic miniatures kit that grained the wood and did some painting and some things like that. This is a building that's in silver plume and scratch built completely out of styrene. So I like to bounce back and forth. I get on a wood kick for a while, and then I get on a styrene kick, and then I build some urethane kits. And I like to bounce around material wise and just see what's possible. And the thing here was, I liked the wood kits, but as I got into styrene, I wanted to see if I could make the styrene look as wood appearance as I could. And this model was just basically an experiment in that. Now, one thing I don't like about the model is you can see here the windows. I had glazed them with a Mylar, and they tend to bow and do funny things over time. And, you know, so they pull away from the mullions there, and it looks bad. A lot of my early models were built with actual microscope glass. And I got to say, I've gone back to that. I much prefer it as a medium. But, and you'll see later, you do get broken windows with that, and that can be problematic. And again, this is a little experiment. This is a large scale outhouse that I built after I attended a clinic with Joe Cray, a very famous large scale modeler here in Colorado. And this is actually Northeastern wood, and it's their basic scribe siding and everything. But he had a little clinic on how to make it look like individual boards and some different weathering techniques. And so I came home after his clinic kind of excited about it and built this little model just to see what could be done. And then this is a large scale caboose, 1 to 24, that I built 30 about 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. Built it for my dad for his under Christmas tree layout. It's completely scratch built with the exception of the trucks, which are Delton trucks. But they do have the springs. Of course, they were freight trucks, which means they had coil springs, and the cabooses had the leaf springs. So the leaf springs are scratch built. The windows are built out of between 18 and 24 pieces of individual pieces of wood glued to microscope glass. And you can see here in this cupola and this one, the glass is broken, and there's really no way to get that cupola off. So this caboose has broken windows. This is not a great photo, but a large scale station, again, built in styrene of the Mount Princeton. You can tell I like this little depot. This is completely scratch built with the exception of these are Simpson doors and windows. And this appeared in Model Railroader magazine eons ago. There was a running joke. I had made friends with a lot of people on the staff, and they bought the article when my kid was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, something like that. It finally appeared when he was in junior high. And apparently Larson really liked the article, and he would pitch it a couple times a year, and for whatever reason, it would get bounced out. And I would just tease him about it for years. Well, it finally appeared when my kid was in junior high. So that was kind of fun. I didn't make the top 5, or I wasn't the longest article that had been in the files there. There's a number of guys that had me beat, but apparently I was top 5. So 8 years to appear. And again, another large scale model. Just, I was experimenting with this brick stuff. I found it in a dollhouse, and it's basically you got a brick stencil and you dab this stuff on and it dries and looks like brick. And it was all right. It was kind of fun to, again, I like experimenting with things. Kind of get to my journey into this. I'd been in the business and I'd made good friends with Lee Riley of Bachman, and they had done a couple books about their track and everything, and they weren't really particularly happy with him for whatever reason. And so they contracted me to write this book about Bachman Easy Track, and they wanted it to just not be a track plan book per se, but more of how you think about the track and how you use the track and all that sort of thing. And so it took me probably about 2 years to write the book, primarily because I built 12 layouts to go in the book. And I'll show you a couple photos of all of that. But people ask me now, do you have a layout? And the answer is currently no. I'm still trying to recover from this Bachman book. There was a lot of layout building at that time. This is the actual model that I did, and it's just a little diorama on foam, and it was to show modelers how they could use Bachman track, but make it look a lot better. And you can see the track up here is painted, it's ballasted. Again, this is just foam that I stacked up and carved with a knife and colored, and some Woodland Scenics products here. But the point of the cover was to just show what we believed were going to be beginning type modelers, how to go to that next step using these products. And I'm pleased to say this book is actually still in print. It still sells, and once every year to 18 months, I go to the mailbox and there's a royalty check from it, and for a book that's been out for over a decade. And here's just a couple photos of things that appeared in the book. This is a little mining layout that's based on Chuck Youngkirk's Gum Stump and Snowshoe. Some of you older guys may remember that back in the day. So we built it with Bachman track. I did this with my other Riley friend, George Riley, who also works for White River and been a buddy of mine, lives in Virginia. And so he started this, and then I flew in and we finished the layout. I built most of the scenery and that kind of stuff. And then this was the Iowa Central layout. And again, just simple stuff. It's just foam. It's just grass mats that are glued down, and a couple buildings. And, we weren't killing ourselves on this. We just wanted to show what was possible with a minimum amount of effort. And then this was the Pelican Bay, which was a more advanced layout. It's still 4x8 space basically, but you had some switching and some other interesting things you could do. You see Mrs. Riley's frozen fish sticks on the background there. little nod to my late friend Lee. And then this is when I was working for Karstens, or for model railroading, and then Karstens and everything. I had a good friend here in Denver, Don Strait. And if you read the Owen 30 annual, you'll notice he's mentioned as the editor emeritus. But he had an Owen 30 layout. And after all the Bachman stuff, I basically went over and built on his layout. That was fun for me. And he had a nice basement and, a pretty good run. And so this is signage that I had done for some of his buildings. I love using graphics to create signs. So there's some of the signs that I did for him. Here's coming down from his higher line. And I built a lot of the scenery on this. And as he was building it, suggested things. I'm a visual guy, and I said, Don, you've got this straight run, but don't make it straight. Curve the track. Let's make it interesting for the viewer. Let's make it, if you ever want to photograph this thing, let's make it interesting. Let's put a little wiggle in your track. You're modeling narrow gauge. And he agreed, and it made for a compelling transition scene between two kind of urban areas. And then here's the upper area. Kind of the same thing here. You see you've got a wall in the background here, and he had set up these buildings to parallel the wall. And I said, Don, if you just take this back building and move it out a couple inches so that it doesn't parallel the wall, it's going to be more interesting. You have more interesting leading lines. And these are kind of the things that I think about when doing scenery, is what's going to compel the viewer to come in and look at the work that you did. And so we did a lot of those sorts of things on his layout. This was featured in the 2015 Owen 30 annual, and it's really a nice layout. It's a shame Don and the layout unfortunately are gone now, but it was a lot of fun to work on it. And that's a station that I had scratch built for him. And then here's another area. I did most of the scenery in this area. Same thing here. I love building scenery. That is my main modeling thing currently. Scenery I just enjoy doing it. I find it fun and relaxing, and I like the colors, and use a lot of art techniques that I learned over the years for scenery. And then I'll do something like this. This retaining wall is individual sticks, and I cut them, and I stained them, and I glued them, and then I backfilled it with all this, and this is real dirt that is off I-70 that I sifted in giant buckets and got down to scale size. Don and the rest of the guys that used to work on his layout thought I was nuts, because I'm nuts. But the end result was exactly what I'd hoped it would be, kind of that giant mining Argo type retaining wall that you see frequently, used to see frequently here in Colorado. A lot of them have been torn down because they got unstable. But these held up, mining and structures for many, many years here in the state. And it's something that we definitely wanted to have on the layout. So I was glad I went to the effort to do it. And again, part of the dimensioning that we were talking about and why I wrote that program is one of the other things I enjoyed doing is scale drawings of model railroad equipment. If you have a copy of Slim Gauge Cars, I actually provided 8 or 10 drawings for that book. And so this is kind of my just relaxing Zen thing, do the research. And I'm fortunate to live here in Colorado, where much of this equipment still exists and is accessible. And I can go out and photograph it and put a tape measure on it, and then convert it into drawings that modelers can use. And so my journey as a book editor kind of came, I morphed from a modeler. I got into the business in 94 there, and have gone through a number of things, and became much more of an editor and graphic designer than a modeler. I still like to model, but I'm not very prolific anymore, because I spend most of my time sitting in front of the computer and making stuff for other people. And the reason I'm compelled to do that is when I was a young modeler, I had a lot of guys that were just very kind to me. They were either good mentors or very supportive, starting with my father. But Alan J. Brewster lived here in Denver for a few years, and he was very nice. John Maxwell, was very supportive. Bob Richardson at the Colorado Railroad Museum, and on and on and on. And so in reading other magazines and everything, it compelled me to get to where I wanted to help modelers enjoy modeling more. And so my contribution is finding books and magazines and producing them to enhance other people's enjoyment of the hobby. And that tremendous lead up is, I like to joke about that, but truly I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy. When I played sports, I started as a running back and I moved to offensive line. I was a catcher and an outfielder, and I played goalie in hockey and everything. But I'm just not a glory guy. If people know who I am and enjoy the things I do, that's great. But I don't do this, in a look at me kind of way. It's a way for me to pay back to a hobby that I really enjoy, and I like other people to enjoy as much as I do. So that's kind of what compels me to do what I do. And here's just kind of a rundown of some books that I've done over the years. You'll see a narrow gauge theme here because that's my area of expertise and what I really have a passion about. Although I like all trains of all kinds, but been fortunate that I had people come to me and wanted me to produce their books or do the graphic layouts. This little book right here, Dwayne Erickson is a forest ranger, and he was stationed in the Silver City area and collected every photo that is known to exist on this little 2-foot narrow gauge line that ran in Silver City, New Mexico. And so I was fortunate. If you ever run across this book, and it's pretty rare anymore, pick it up. It's a great little book. This was one of the books I did for Karstens, Practical. We still have that, some copies of that. Railfan for Life. This was a book of Hal Karstens, the late Hal Karstens' railroad photography. And we used to joke that Hal would see where the sun was and check the shadow and then get on the opposite side so he could shoot the dark side of the locomotive. But that's totally not fair, because he did some really spectacular shots. And this was a kind of homage to him. It was a team effort. All the people at Karstens got together and edited various portions of this book. Needless to say, and maybe people don't know this, but Hal really liked narrow gauge. And so he shot a lot of narrow gauge, and I edited that section of the book for Karstens. And I mentioned slim gauge cards a few minutes ago. They had done a version of it before I joined the company. And when I joined it, I got with Hal and I said, I really like that book. I'd like to do a reprint of it, but I'd like to enhance it. And, he said, Mazel tov, knock yourself out. And so this book has a lot more drawings. We upgraded the photographs. We upgraded some of the drawings. Everything that was in the original version of this book appears in this book, but a lot of the drawings were actually better drawings than when it originally appeared. And I think there's 64 narrow gauge cars of various types that appear in this book. We still have copies of this, and if you like narrow gauge or if you like car drawings, it's a great book to have. And then here's an airplane book that I did at Karstens because I had to. The airplane guys, we used to own Flying Models magazine at Karstens, and those guys were a little butthurt that they didn't have their own book. So, I said, well, I'll edit your book. And I've regretted ever since. It's not a great book, but I did what I had to work with. So Lehigh Valley Diesel Pictorial, again, I love trains of all kinds, and Lehigh Valley is kind of an interesting little railroad. The aforementioned easy model railroads for Bachman. If you guys know Bob Walker, he wrote a column for us, the Scratch Builder's Corner column, for years and years, both in Craftsman, in RMC when it was with Karstens, and then with White River until he retired, 6 months ago, perhaps. But a great modeler, great scratch builder of buildings. And this book just has all of his techniques. A lot of his early columns condensed into this book and then enhanced with bigger and additional photographs. This book was fun because, again, I really view things with a historical perspective. And we had this manuscript at Karsten's, and I've always been an O scaler. That's the one thing. While I've bounced around various things and I've tried all the scales, I've always been an O scale. It's just my thing. And Keith had a really compelling manuscript there. This Lynn Westcott looking guy on the cover is actually my brother. And, there's two types of lanes. There are the, 5'8" to 5'10", really stocky, muscular lanes. And then there's the 6 foot to 6'2" leaner lanes. And you can see the two brothers. I'm the stocky one and he's the taller, leaner one. But he's wearing my reading glasses and looking at a model at the O-Scale Club there. We had a lot of really old models there, and he picked it up and I shot it, converted it to black and white, and he looks vintage, but that's my brother. This is a narrow gauge book that was strictly about, you want to talk about narrow focus. The Rocky Mountain Railroad Club used to do a 3-day excursion over Memorial Days. And they did it from 54 to mid 60s. And it was about $20 a ticket, and you got to ride the trains wherever they were going for 3 days. And Stan Ryan started doing this. I think his first trip was in 54 when he was an 18-year-old kid. So he photographed this. And of course, Stan went on to become a great narrow gauge historian. Unfortunately, he just passed away about a month and a half ago. But I was able to do 2 books with Stan, and just a super nice guy, and a great book on a kind of forgotten piece of history now, on lines that don't exist anymore. The Rocky Mountain Railroad Club still exists and still does these kind of excursions, but what they did on the narrow gauge was truly tremendous back in that time frame. Another guy that I enjoyed working with, Paul Scholes, just a preeminent scenery builder. And as I mentioned, that's kind of my thing. So I was very fortunate to work with him on this book, and his scenery techniques were outstanding. And so that was a fun book to edit. And then, of course, the Owen 30 Annual, which we've mentioned. I was very honored to do the last book that Mal Farrell did. And it was flattering because he sought me out. He had read the annuals, and I've known Mal for many, many years. And he said, I want to do one more book, and I'd like you to edit it and put it together. And I said, sure, I'd love to. I'm honored. And it's interesting because you'd think the Rio Grande has been done to death, but Mal had collected photographs from literally the beginning of the railroad. And this book only goes to 1910. So 1910 and earlier are the only photographs that appear in this book. And some of the photographs are so sharp because were taken on glass plates. You could shave with them. They're just amazing in the amount of detail and things that they show. So really a fun book to do. One of my coworkers at White River, who works in our office, she's not a railroader particularly, does a lot of the shows. And she says, this is her favorite book because she just likes the presentation and likes looking at all the old photographs of Colorado. H-3 Annual, we talked about that. And I did this book 2 years ago with Bob Walker again. 21 projects, and it's literally that. He actually gave me a manuscript that had 19 projects, and then he sent me another one, so it was 20 projects. And I thought, you know what, that's a terrible name for a book. Build me one more thing and it'll be 21 projects. So he built this gas station that you see on the cover here, which took second place at the 2017 National Narrow Gauge Convention. But it is a book of 21 scratch building structure projects in O scale and HO. And just Bob does a nice job with that. There's some drawings in there. And again, getting back to that calculation thing that we talked about, I designed a table using Excel and printed it out in the book there. That's just an easy conversion for any modeler that wants to bounce between scales or has plans of a certain scale, and you throw them on a copier and you do it to this ratio. And I think that book is $24 or something like that. It's almost worth it just for the tables in the back. Eureka and Palisade was an interesting little narrow gauge railroad that, died in the 30s, like many narrow gauge railroads did. But this particular gentleman had researched this book for decades, and he's a buddy with Mal Farrell. And Mal said, Greg, talk to Chris about doing your book. And he provided me with the manuscript and the photos. I thought, man, this is amazing. What an interesting book. And so we put that out. That also came out about 2 years ago. Fascinating. Again, everybody's familiar with the Eureka, the little narrow gauge 440 that still operates, owned by Dan Marcroft. And that came from this railroad, but it is a fascinating story of this railroad, including the owner or operator of this railroad at one time taking on the U.S. Postal Service after World War I, beating them. So fun stuff there. And the way he did it, I won't ruin the surprise, but pretty outrageous. Rio Grande narrow gauge K36. You guys are seeing a theme here. I like narrow gauge, and those are the books that I tend to do. And this is just strictly a one locomotive type, but this locomotive is highly interested because we all know it. They exist on the Durango and Silverton and the Cumbres and Toltec. And out of the 10 locomotives that Baldwin built in 1925, 9 of them still exist, and 8 of them still operate under steam, which is a tremendous percentage of a class of steam locomotive. And then the book that I did last year with Stan Ryan, unfortunately, will be our last effort together. But a book strictly on high side gondolas. And Stan's research on this was absolutely unbelievable. He researched everything that there is to know. There are charts and graphs in the back that show the disposition of every single gondola in this class, when it was scrapped, when it was wrecked, when it was rebuilt. Anything else interesting about it. He was just a terrific historian. So it's one of those kind of books, if you have any interest, like old Carson used to say back on the Tonight Show, everything you always wanted to know is in that book. And we'll talk briefly about garden trains. I'm kind of excited about this. I like large scale railroading. And of course, a lot of the models I showed you early on were some of my large scale models. I was a pretty serious large scale modeler at one time. And I've just felt like this was an underserved market. And we'd been working on this in the background. And when Garden Railways announced that they were ceasing publication, I got on the phone with the boss and I said, Kevin, we've been talking about this. I think it's time. And he thought about it over the weekend and said, yeah, I think you're right. Let's make it happen. So started putting the book together a couple months ago. It'll go to the printer in February. And it's going to be a mix of outdoor, indoor, but large scale trains. Everything smaller than ride-on and everything bigger than HO that you can run outdoors if you choose to. And a mesh of pretty simple projects for the beginning, kind of getting into garden trains, large scale trains, to very serious scratch building. And one of the photos or the story I was editing right before I came on was a fella, and in real life, he works for the Cumbres and Toltec. He works in their engine shop, but he's a large scale modeler and he builds unbelievably terrific models. And you'll see some of his models in this first one. And I think, yeah, that's it. So I'm going to unshare my screen and come back. And now you get to see me. I'm so sorry. The other view was better. But that's just kind of my journey through this, some of my models. And if you haven't figured out, I really enjoy interacting with other model railroaders. I find them fascinating people. I really dig what they do. I really appreciate their craftsmanship and the things that they go through. And, as an editor, I will freely admit I know a ton of stuff, but I don't know everything. And I can't know everything, and I don't try and know everything. What I do know is how to find things and how to find people who know things. So right now I'm editing a book on Shay locomotives. It is right now 623 pages. It's probably going to be a little bigger than that. It's a work that the authors had worked on for decades, literally. And we got the project. It was assigned to me, I don't know, 4 months ago or something like that. And because I know a lot about Shay locomotives, I went through the book and instantly found some errors, which I corrected. But I also know what I don't know. And so I got one of the foremost experts on Shays to come alongside me, and he's been looking at the manuscript, and he found some other things that we need to change, in addition to providing, well, probably about 100 new photographs for the book that very interesting or never before published or that kind of thing. And that's what you do as an editor, is find people who really know things and then allow them to do their best work in their most creative way, and create an environment for them. And that's what I enjoy doing. You can kind of see in my background there some of my kits, and you can see part of a bookshelf. Well, surrounding me on 3 walls, and except for the rear one, there are bookshelves, and they are loaded with hundreds of railroad and research materials. And then if you go out the door of my office down the hall, there's another 3 bookcases full of books. And that's what it takes to, I'm a book collector. I love books. But chances are, if there's a question or if I'm working on something, I know where I can find the answer, because I either own the book or, again, I know somebody who does, and I can research and get me to somebody who can answer those questions. And it's all to provide the best possible information that I can for both modelers and people who like historical railroad stuff. So that's me and what I do in a nutshell. And I can monologue with the best of them, but I'm going to shut up if people have a couple questions or anything they want to ask me. I love taking questions, and I love chatting, and we can do that for a few minutes, and then we can get somebody else on here and they can tell us some things.
Hey, Chris, it's Lloyd.
Yes, Lloyd. Yeah, like you needed to introduce yourself.
Well, there are a few people who actually haven't heard my pleasant, baritone.
Go
Anyway,
ahead. What you got?
I was just curious, what's the anticipated publishing date for the 2021 HON3?
2021 HON3 will be probably late October of this year.
And have you heard anything about the convention?
I've talked to Johnny frequently, and that's Johnny Graybill, who is the committee chair for the National Narrow Gauge in Hickory this year. And they are absolutely a go.
Okay, good.
I've been working with the people in both the convention center, the hotels, and the local government there. And they've got plans in place to keep everybody safe. The vaccines are going out, and unless there is some kind of just unforeseen crisis that sets us back tremendously, that convention is going to happen.
All right, great. Thanks.
You bet. So I'll see you there, or I'll hear you there, and then I'll see you.
Well, Chris, I got a question for you. What would be your advice to somebody that would love to get an article published in one of the magazines that you edit? What would you tell them? How should they proceed?
I have kind of a standard thing that I do, and when I get an inquiry and they say, what should I write about, or how that, I just say, look, what are you passionate about? If you had 5 guys over to your railroad and you guys were standing around shooting the bull, what would you want to talk about, and how would you present that? And I really believe in a very informal, just exchange of ideas in that way. And when people write with that in mind, it tends to be a lot more accessible. It doesn't get technical, it doesn't get dry, because they're really writing from their heart and their passion. And then the other thing is, it's got to have great photography. Now, somebody posted, Phil, I need a better camera. Well, hey, it's the Mac camera that's built into this thing. It's crystal clear on mine, but I don't think my internet connection is great for these kind of things. And it does look a little fuzzy, but I can't have fuzzy stuff in the magazine. So I'm very strict on what the photos look like. They got to be in focus. They got to be sharp. If the color's a little off, I can fix that. If it needs a crop, things like that, that's doable. But if it's not in focus and if it's not interesting, then it doesn't end up being an interesting article. So, and I'm very happy to help people with photography. I myself am a one-trick pony. I can take excellent model railroad photos. I can't take anything else. My wife and I go out and shoot outside. Her photos are beautiful. I'm standing right next to her and mine stink compared to hers. But if it's miniature and it's got a rail on it, I can shoot a pretty clean photo of it. And I'm happy to help people with the techniques on how to do that. And so that's the main thing. Just if you have passion about it and you want to share it, you're halfway home right there.
How about another question for Chris?
All right,
Chris.
so I'm either boring or I talk too much. And
No, not at all.
I'll go through.
Jim, I was just going to mention to Chris, he mentioned a friend between the two of us and in Lee Riley, who worked at Bachman. And it's amazing how many times I think of Lee in the last week for some reason. I don't know why, but
yep.
He's one of those characters in model railroading we'll miss. But in one way, I think he's still talking from a lunch that I had with him.
That may be true. We used to tease Lee about he'd go on something and say, Lee, I didn't ask you how to build a clock. I just asked what time it was. He was, and we love to tease him, but Lee was absolutely brilliant.
Oh,
he really was.
Absolutely.
And not a linear thinker. So it was a little tough to follow him sometimes. And I would sometimes say, Lee, what the hell are you talking about? And he would go back and connect the dots for slower guys like me. And I'm like, okay, I see how you got there now. And damn, that was brilliant. He really was. Well, and he was such a sweet man. Let me tell you a little Lee story. I was still working for Model Railroading back then. And Bachman had just announced that they were bringing out their HO scale Shay, which is a beautiful piece, and wanted to get some publicity for it and everything. But he really wanted me to understand what they were doing there. And I said, well, and he said, I'm going to Cass. We're going to ride the trains. And I said, well, that's nice, but I'm in Colorado and I'm not coming to West Virginia to ride trains with you. And he said, yeah, check your mailbox. Well, I went to my mailbox a week later and there were airline tickets from Colorado to West Virginia to meet him so I could go ride the train with him. And he just used his frequent flyer miles, I guess, from going over to China and everything. But that's the kind of guy he was. Yeah. And I mean, what a precious memory of riding trains. And it was funny because we ran into two other people in the hobby that were manufacturers at the time that just wandered in like we did. And it was like a convention, an NMRA convention on top of Bald Knob there.
You know, one time that we were in the hotel lobby and it was just as the ON 30 stuff was going to come out. And it was at an NMRA convention. There was a bunch of us standing there and we were all talking to Lee, and all of a sudden Lee says, he looked around like it was the Secret Service. Like, well, is there anybody around? Do you guys want to come up and see something really cool? But he says, you got to keep a secret. Clark, can you keep a secret? I said, I can keep a secret. So we go up to his room and he's got a track and he's got this ON 30 locomotive running around with the cars. And we just looked at each other and go, oh my God, what have you done? And, you know, it just took off like crazy, of course. And after that, you'd meet him usually a year later at the NMRA convention or sometimes at the narrow gauge convention, and he'd look around. Clark, you want to come upstairs?
Yeah, he always had goodies.
And you never wanted to say no because he had you intrigued. You knew you were going to see something that nobody else had seen yet.
He was without a doubt Bachman's greatest salesman.
Oh God, yeah.
Fortunate to be in his inner sanctum. I was making sales calls in the Philadelphia area and went to the office there and went in his office. And again, here's an Owen 30 story. His office was huge and it was just loaded with track and samples and all of these things. And out of the corner of my eye, I spot these little steam locomotives. And they were black, but they had like neon green fittings and orange pilots. And I mean, they're just bizarre colors. And picked one up, and sure enough, because I'm a CNS guy, I said, this is CNS Mogul. That's what this is. And he said, yeah, this is something I'm working on. It's going to run on HO track. It's ON30. Again, can you keep a secret? Well, Lee's famous. Can you keep a secret? He told 100 other guys who all swore to secrecy. But that was just kind of his thing.
Yeah. Well,
but I got to see that probably 4 years before anybody else had even heard of it. And I thought, if this actually comes out, this could be a big deal.
yeah.
And
Were
it
those-
was back
were those the
then I
porters?
started thinking about the ON30 annual.
Yeah.
Were those the porters?
No, these were the Moguls
Oh,
long before the porters. No,
Yeah.
these were the
Part of it
original
all.
test shots, and before that they'd introduced them to Hawthorne Village or anything.
Yeah. Chris, let me ask you something. How about coming back and doing a show for us on model photography?
Sure. I probably have a clinic that I did way back that if I can find it, I can dust it off. If not, I'll put another one on. But yeah, there are some basic rules. Model photography, as you guys may know if you've done it, the normal rules of photography don't apply, which is why if you hire a pro photographer to shoot your models, you tend to end up pretty disappointed because you do things that a pro photographer doesn't want to do. But that's what it takes to get good, sharp model shots. So yeah, I'd be interested in doing that, Jim. Sure.
That'd be great. Then I'll get in touch with you and we'll work out a time that's good for you and plan for you to come back, because I think a lot of people would really be interested, maybe not for publication or not articles, but just for their own benefit, to have photos of the stuff that they're doing that they can show to their buddies. So,
Well, absolutely. And that's a good point for insurance purposes. You should have photos of your models. And as I was putting together my little program, I realized how few of my own models I'd actually taken photos of. It was kind of a little embarrassing. A couple of those photos were crappy, but that was all I had. And I've built hundreds of models, but I only had, 4 or 5 really pretty good shots of any of them. So I'd be happy to do that. I think it's something
Chris,
to do. Yes.
Can I throw in something else to think about in your photography? I wonder if the cell phone, i.e. iPhone 12 Pro camera system, is actually becoming interesting to use for model photography. I know I've taken some I have an iPhone 6S, so it's older and, it's basically ancient. It still takes pretty good pictures if you hold it down. And I'm just wondering, are we reaching a point where for let's call them the average modeler, that maybe you can actually shoot better pictures if you do it with a phone? And I just wonder, I'd be curious to get your opinion as a professional, because the thing is, a lot of us have access to that more than we do to, some sort of high-end camera that's got remote control so you can run long aperture out, all the things you do, or a stacking software, et cetera. It'd be interesting to get your opinion on that for all of us.
Well, a quick opinion is I have published a few cell phone photos, and it's a case-by-case basis. Some cell phones have capability of taking some pretty good photos. The depth of field can be a bit of an issue depending on how it's doing. They do a good job in substandard lighting conditions. So cell phone photos that I've gotten of modules or people that were taking snaps at home layouts can be surprisingly good, although they're often not as sharp as I would like. But it's something that, yes, if you're careful and you brace your hands and make sure you don't move and some other things, it's possible to get publication grade photos. They certainly have plenty of pixels. That's not the issue. It's more a function of how the lenses focus and things like that. And you mentioned the stacking software. I've published a number of photos that use the stacking software. I'm personally not a big fan of it. I've never had particularly good luck with it, but some people have gotten tremendous results from it. But again, those require tripods, and you have to be very disciplined. but for N scalers or some of that stuff, they're almost the only way to go to get the kind of depth of field that you would like to have for magazine quality.
So where does Chris Lane go from here?
Upstairs and make dinner. Probably have a whiskey. I mean, wait, some people know this and some people don't. My hobby, honestly, is cooking. You know, I work with the trains all day long. I magazine. I do a little bit of model building, but to relax, I cook. I have a wood-fired outdoor pizza oven. I have a smoker unit. I've won awards for my chili and my brisket, and so that's fun for me. Is I just like to cook. So I pretty much feed the wife and whoever else is over any particular night, and that's fun for me. I find it fun and relaxing, and so yeah, I'm going to make something fun and tasty and simple tonight, and then probably have a whiskey, and then get back on the Shea book at about 8:30 tonight and work until midnight or 1 a.m. to try and get chapter 9 done.
What's your dream book? What's the one you want to do at some point? What is that dream book?
I have a book. It's my book. It's a manuscript on foreground scenery. So, and the concept is we know basically how to build scenery. If you have Dave Ferrari's scenery book, his books are tremendous. Dave is both a friend and a killer model railroader, and has written the Bible on building scenery. And then when you combine it with Paul Scholes, you're 90% of the way there. My book would take that, and from an aspect of, because we're building more modules or we're building more close-up work, really taking that fine scale approach to scenery. So building scale weeds and scale pine trees and everything. So again, they photographed in such a way that you're really kind of that military modeler approach, where the scenery is very detailed. It's easy to do, but it just takes a more planning and thought, I think, than a lot of modelers. So a lot of the book will actually be some of the things I've learned over the years from my art training in visualization techniques. How should a scene look, and what are the viewing angles, and how can you coax the viewer into the best viewing angle? And I'm repackaging ideas that are from Disney and animators and people that have done this stuff professionally for years, but I'm going to gear it really towards the model railroader. So that's my dream book. And if I ever finish some of this other stuff, I'll actually finish my own book. But the cobbler in his shoes, right? That's kind of where I'm at on that.
If you get it written, Chris, if you get it written, be sure to make sure you mention the actual brands and materials, because what I find is a lot of people talk about this stuff, but you don't have a clue where the hell to go get it.
That's a great point, Lloyd, and I really am a big believer in that. It was funny when I did the Bachman book, people were nuts about those stupid rocks on the cover. And again, they're just chunks of foam that I took an Alpha knife and some kind of card file and just smashed them up and then painted them. And I got more questions about the damn rocks than any of the other things. And I'm like, this was so basic and so nothing, but it did. That's where the germ of this idea came, that simple techniques and how you do these things, people needed to explain to them. And then once they have those material lists there was another part of this book, and you can find it in the Bachman book. Everybody understands the static grass, and that stuff is amazing.
Yep.
But not everybody has a static grass gun, and you really need one. So, because I'm blessed with nice hair, I teach people in the book how to take a balloon, blow it up, rub it on your hair, and then run it over the grass, and it stands it right up. Static electricity, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we have some things over on YouTube. I guess they really like the idea of the photography setup that you just got roped into. But
all right, well, I'll find that clinic and I'll put that together.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, William Limber was wondering about mentoring. How does one find a mentor?
Well, it's kind of a multi-part process in some ways. I think if you're going and looking for a mentor, I think maybe they can be hard to find. And I wasn't looking for a mentor per se. I just was interested in things. And I was kind of a shy kid, not a shy kid, and I'll explain that. I am by nature a shy person, which you would never guess, but I moved all the time as a kid. My dad was in the oil business, so every crappy place dinosaurs died, we lived there for 9 months or so. And so I was always the new kid in school, and you have a choice. You can have friends or you can be shy, but you can't do both. And so I learned to be more outgoing. And when I was a younger person and I would be in the company of model railroaders or hanging out the hobby shop or anything, I wasn't shy about going up to people and saying, "Excuse me, sir, I'm interested in something you're doing." And that served me well. And a lot of guys, John Maxwell would write me letters. I'd write him something and ask him a question and buy a photo or something from him. And he'd write me back a letter and correct my grammar because that's what he did. And, but because of that, he knew I was interested in it, and he mentored me to a certain extent. So and this applies for older people too, if you just make your interests known and you approach people who you admire or think can teach you something respectfully, I find that especially model railroaders are pretty nice and are really happy to share what they know and are interested that people are interested in what they're doing. And I think that's probably the best first steps to finding a good mentor.
Chris, I got on here late and I
Hey,
have a
Alan.
question for you. How are you?
Good.
The Shea book that you are drinking over, is this the long promised 30-year project from the
Yes.
guys out on the West Coast?
Yes, it's now this 30-year stupid project is now within less than 3 months. I'm close,
Great.
Alan.
Okay.
But yeah, it was one of those things. And, I will say this. Some of you guys may have books or may know people with books. Guess what? We're not getting any younger. And so I actually had to be a little bit more forceful with one of my authors that I wanted to be. He's got this photography book and he captured world steam. And he's like, "When are you going to finish it up?" and all this kind of stuff. And I said, "Dude, you photographed this thing in 1969 through 1975. What were you doing the last 50 years? I just got this book 6 months ago. Guess what? Take a number, pal."
Well,
so don't wait.
Faster.
The name of the Shea book.
Hey, we're not fooling anybody. We're calling it The Shea Locomotive in Illustrated History.
Been waiting 25 years for this book.
You, me, and everybody else. And honestly, Lloyd, that's how I got the property. It had been kicked around. It had been through 2 publishers who just basically couldn't handle it. And a gentleman who I've developed a relationship with was instrumental in getting the property to White River. And then we had it for a time. And I mean, it's daunting. There's probably over 1,000 photos in there. And the editor that had it said, I don't know when I'm ever going to finish this book. And because I do turn things as fast as anybody at White River.
Are you thinking single volume?
Yeah, we're doing a single volume. And because there's no way to split it, Lloyd.
A 700-page book with
no, I've cut it way down. It's only 627.
Is it going to be available at the originally announced price 30 years ago?
I'm going to say no. I don't know what that was. The good news, I don't have anything to do with the pricing. I just tell the boss, here's the pages, here's the count and everything. And he gets with the printer and they figure out the price. And I say, great. And I put it on the cover someplace.
Who's it available from now?
It will be available from White River. We've not, people know that we have it. We haven't formally announced it. And, you'll probably start seeing ads for it in the next couple months. So, and we will always have like we do with all of our books, we'll have a pre-order price that you can get it. It's a slightly reduced price and free shipping on a book of this size. That's definitely going to save you a couple bucks. So watch our magazines and the internet for the ads.
Oh, you have magazines also? What magazines are those?
Alan, somebody ought to hit you upside the head.
I'm muting myself right now.
Hey, when you and I were talking, Chris, I sent Alan a message saying, "Hey, we're on," and I'm talking to Chris. And we were talking about Lee, and he goes, "Oh, the next thing I know, all of a sudden he's on, and his his face is on the picture."
His smiling visage.
Well,
how's that for editor time?
That's why you're the editor.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I can put lipstick on the pig with the best of them. So, and I don't mean you, Alan. I've never put lipstick on Alan. I want to say that publicly. No matter how much whiskey we had had.
Well, listen, guys, this has been great. Chris, thank you so very much for tonight. I really do appreciate it. I do want to stop the recording of the show. I hope nobody leaves, and then you all can go on as far as you want to. I've got some announcements that I'd like to make before we stop the show, but not many. I don't want you to forget Greg Cassidy and Chris Corse and their build program of Chris's kit. And Chris, you'll have to refresh my memory of exactly what that kit is.
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple slides. If I could get the share screen, I'll go ahead and share those.
I think I am no longer sharing.
And this is going to be starting March the 10th. Will be the first show where we do this. Oops, and Greg is going to be building the kit in very short 15-minute segments once a week. And it's available on Chris's website right now. So if anybody is interested in it, I encourage you to make sure that you order it in time to get it here before Greg starts building the kit on March the 10th. Bob Farquhar and Dale Rush of Blair Line are going to start their build of his kit. And Chris, I'll come right back to you, of his kit on April the 17th. And Blair Line is giving a 25% discount and free shipping in the US on that kit. So I want you to be familiar with that. And also Rick Steele is going to build a flat car from his LaBelle line of kits. He's going to build it in O scale. It's also going to be available in HO scale. And I've just arranged for Gaylord Gill and Bar Mills to come to the show. And Bar Mills is going to give a discount on one of their kits that I think is going to be really something different and interesting for the show. It's called One Build. I had never heard of it before. Bar Mills has been producing this kit, I understand, for 20 years or so. And it's as close to a scratch building project as you'll ever see, short of actually doing a scratch building process. So the One Build is going to be the kit, and Gaylord is the one that's going to build it. And we're going to try to start that sometime in April, but I don't have a date yet for that. And we've got Chris going to come back pretty soon, hopefully, and show us how to do our photography. So I'm happy about that. And I hope that Clark will consider coming back and trying to show us how to build a switch one of these days, because I think that would be interesting. I keep hearing about people wanting to scratch build switches, and how on earth do I start, and why should I, and what's so great about a scratch built switch when I can buy one ready made. So Clark, I hope you'll consider that for the future.
I will. I just got a new camera for doing like surface projects. So I will try that out, and we can certainly look into that.
Fantastic. So next time, Pete Steinmetz of Dead Rail is going to be our featured modeler. And Martin Breckbelt, MMR, is going to talk about scratch building. And Bill Neal, MMR, is going to talk about track planning. And Jeff Bunza is going to do animation. So it's going to be a full show next Wednesday. I hope you'll come back for it. I thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did, and I learned a lot. I hope you did. So thanks again for coming. And with that, I think we're through.
All right. Do you want the Chris to finish what he was going to do with the models?
What models?
Oh,
yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm sorry. Chris, I apologize. I forgot you. Thanks, Ed. So this is the bill that Chris and Greg Cassidy are going to do. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Let's see. Share screen.
And this is going to start March the 10th on our show.
Yeah, I've got March 3rd on here, but okay, it's the 10th. Easy enough.
Yep.
So there we have the company house version of the Gray Street house, which you see in the lower left corner here. We've got the O scale version on the left, and then of course the original Gray Street house on the right. And then you see the new build there, the beat up white looking version. And that's available on conowingomodels.com. I put it in the chat. So once you log on, you can either page down and go to the featured models, or if you go into the shop feature, it's listed in there. So that's what I had for you.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, indeed.
So now, Ed, I think you can stop recording.